government here, but that has profound cost. Before we moved to the Wilson building here, I used to have an office on 441 Judiciary Square, and you look outside the window on 11th floor office, and you see nothing but museums, galleries, monuments, lovely, lovely places, but nothing I could tax. So because of all that, because of the height limitation, which really makes a beautiful city, but there is no tax base, and that is the fundamental problem. And how to manage with this limited, constrained tax base has been a fundamental problem. I hope that we would find a solution somehow to that perpetual problems. I do not see any possibility of commuter taxes in my lifetime. And I do not think we are going to talk about that. But there has to be some consideration as to how to finance a nation's capital. Services that are being used like metro, which is a very vital to the region's economic development. Second busiest transit system in the country. And yet, it is a great burden on the city. While majority of the riders during rush hours are either federal workers or tourists. We welcome tourists to the city. But at the same time, there is a cost here. Federal government alone imposes roughly $1 billion of cost on the city. Because, let me put it this way, how many cities run a tax department, a motor vehicle department, Medicaid operation? It go on and on. These are state functions. These are not city functions. If next door here at the Treasury, if there is or IRS, if there is a fire over there, and some would hope that there is a fire at the IRS, not I, but some would, then whose fire department would go there? It would be the city's department. So the question here is, how do you pay for all those services? And that is, I think, a major issue that we all need to think about. And I hope, I very much hope that this seminar this morning and this book that Rupak and Enid had put together with great effort, an excellent guide to see what we can learn from other cities, other jurisdictions about financing nation's capital. I very much appreciate this invitation, and I wish all the success to you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gandhi. Rupak Chattopadhyay is the Vice President of Governance Programs at the Forum of Federations. He was previously the Senior Director of Global Programs and Director of Asia-Pacific Programs at the Forum. In the latter capacity, he headed the Constitutional Advisory Program in support of Sri Lankan peace talks from 2002 to 2004, and was closely involved in the discussions on constitutional reforms in the Philippines. Today, Rupak will provide a background and review of the finance and governance of capital cities in federal systems. Please welcome Rupak Chattopadhyay.
Thank you very much, Steve. I'd be remiss this morning if I didn't express my gratitude to Steve and his crew here for hosting us in DC with open arms. And I'd also be remiss if I didn't recognize Bob Ebel, who with a lot of energy put together this event, as well as another one that we're going to later this evening. Let me start by saying that I think Nat, in his address, has covered a lot of issues that you'll find in our book A lot of things that are common across several capital cities: issues of representation, issues of taxation, issues of limited limited taxing capacity because of the size of the city, fragmentation of the metropolitan region. So all of these things are very much part of the book. And over the course of our presentation, I imagine you'll hear about the experiences from some other countries. The way I thought we'd organize this presentation is I'll provide a background and overview of the context in which we did this book, as well as a little bit of an overview of findings in our survey of capital cities. And then Enid will talk about governance structures and the fiscal aspect of our work. To understand how this book came about, I have to say a few words about the organization that I belong to. The Forum of Federations was set up as a learning organization on federalism issues by the Government of Canada in 1999, actually as a consequence of a trilateral conference between President Clinton, Ernest Zaido of Mexico, and our then Prime Minister, Jean Charest. Over the course of the last 10 years, the Forum has become an internationalized organization with 8 other partner governments, and I've got their flags there. So it's Australia, Brazil, Canada, Ethiopia, Germany, India, Mexico, Nigeria, and Switzerland. So you see, we've got partners in several, a range of federal countries around the world. And what we do is, as an organization, we promote intergovernmental learning amongst practitioners on a range of federalism issues in these countries where we work. We would love for the US at some point to become a partner government. It's been very difficult to engage the US, but that's another story. So this provides the background for how this book came about. As I mentioned, the Forum was founded at a major international conference in '99, and since then, every 3 years, the Forum has hosted, in partnership with a host government, an international conference on federalism. This year, in December, it's going to be in Ethiopia, in Addis Ababa, in partnership with the government of Ethiopia. But our last conference in 2007 was in India. And one of the issues we discussed at the conference in India was the issue of metropolitan governance. And a keynote speaker at the panel was the Chief Minister of Delhi. I suppose a Chief Minister would be the equivalent of a state governor. And Delhi, like DC, is a national capital, but also a state in its own right, in that it has state functions, some of the things that Nat talked about. But I would go so far as to say that of all the capitals we surveyed, Delhi is probably the worst in terms of the way the governance structures are organized. Not surprisingly, the Chief Minister so threw her hands up into the air at some point during discussions, said, well, I'd really like to know how other countries, how other federations organize their capitals, how are they financed, what is the nature of the relationship with federal government. And a little bit of the background to how much of a mess Delhi is that they have an elected chief minister, but she's not responsible for the most important things people worry about, which is land use and policing. And I imagine Enid, in her presentation, will talk about this. So there really is a dichotomy between the person who is apparently responsible in the eyes of the public for how the city is run, and who really is responsible for how things happen. So this then is the policy context for the book. As Steve mentioned, we looked at a number of countries, number of capitals, again quite a range there, 11 countries in all. The reason for our choice, of course, was that we wanted to ensure that we captured the full range of sizes, population sizes, from sort of Bern at one end, Bern in Switzerland at one end of the scale, to New Delhi and Mexico City at the other end of the scale. So Bern, I suppose, is less than 500,000 people, and you've got New Delhi and Mexico City at the other end, between 14 and 21 million people, depending on sort of how you count numbers there. We also wanted to ensure that all the relevant regions, all the major regions, were covered in our survey. So we have North American cases, the Latin American cases, European, Asia, Africa, and of course the single Australian case, which is Canberra. We also wanted to ensure, sorry, Edith's cringing there. we didn't have Australia, but subsumed them into Asia for our purpose. The range of governing structures, and you'll see when Eden makes a presentation, that there are some distinct forms that governance structures take in capital cities. So we wanted to cover that. And then, of course, we had a final, very pragmatic consideration, which is the availability of authors in time to put a report out. One of the countries we really wanted to cover in our survey was Brazil. But we don't have a chapter on Brasilia because we couldn't find someone to do this in time. And it's very unfortunate that it, because at one point we asked our partners in Brazil to propose an author, in fact in Brasilia to propose an author, and the comeback they had was, well, we have no problems in Brasilia, I don't know what you'd write about. And we said to them, well, maybe that's something to write about, but in the end we couldn't find an author. Now, the heart of the issue is when we started this, people looked at us and wondered, why do you want to study capitals? What's different about them? Are they really different from other cities? And as we did our project, we really began to appreciate that capitals are really distinct from other cities in federations. I mean, Steve in his opening remark actually alluded to this. In all countries, federal and non-federal, capitals play host to national and governmental institutions. They have unique cultural roles. I mean, they are the showcase, if you like, of national pride, national identity, and often the magnet for public ire against government policy, public protest, and so on and so forth. I'm sure you've seen all of these facets in DC over the years. And of course, last but not the least, they also I think Nat said that sound travels faster than the speed of light in Washington, and this is true. Particularly in federal countries, federal capitals get blamed for all the ills that fall upon the country, and this is what really makes them very, very unique and very different from other cities in federal countries. There are other differences as well. But then the other question we had to consider was, are federal capitals really very different from capitals in unitary countries? And again, we found that indeed there were some things that made federal capitals or capitals in federal countries different from those in unitary states. Federal states are either large or diverse or both. In the United States is continental in scale, Canada is continental in scale, Australia is continental in scale, and even where in countries like Australia and in the United States, you have linguistic uniformity across the country, there are cultural differences and regional differences that manifest themselves across the country. And then you have small countries like Switzerland, where 6 million people, but 4 major language groups. And national capitals, therefore, have to play a very, very important role in somehow reflecting the diversity of their countries and providing a neutral space for politics and public policy to play out. They also have to have, they also play an important role in that they are not, they should not be seen to be captured by the interest of any one regional, ethnic, linguistic group. The other issue we found was around location, how capitals are located, where are capitals located, and this has always been a very tricky issue in many federal countries. In Canada, for example, our capital, Ottawa, lies on the historic fault line, linguistic fault line between Anglo-Canada and Francophone Canada, and was moved there for a very specific reason, which is to be more defensible against American aggression. But this was many hundred years ago, over 100 years ago. But these are important considerations, and unitary countries don't have to deal with a lot of these sorts of issues. I imagine that I'm aware that in the Federalist Papers, provision was made for a federal capital in the United States long before DC was established. And I've read some literature that suggests that DC was established also on sort of a cultural fault line between the North and the South in its choice